The boot came first, shined black leather cutting the air like it owned the room, and when it came at my chest, I did what my body learned a long time ago: pivot, catch, redirect. And Sergeant Trevor Maddox hit the floor in front of a federal judge while the whole courtroom gasped like they'd all just remembered gravity 3 seconds ago. I was a janitor with a mop and rubber gloves. Now every eye was asking who I really was and what in the world I was about to do next. You know what I mean? I'll tell you straight, like we're on a front porch with cheap coffee and a long afternoon. No speeches, no violins. Just what it felt like to carry truth in my pocket while people with shiny badges tried to tell me it wasn't there. Yeah, that happened. Most days at the Northport Federal Courthouse Building C, I was invisible by design cartwheels, squeaking buckets, sloshing bleach that cracked my hands. Coffee like burned pennies, riding shotgun in a chipped thermos. I kept my head down and my ears open because the person no one looks at is the person who sees everything. And that morning, a skinny kid named Jalen Ward stood to testify with a purple bloom on his cheek and a voice too small for the big mic in front of him, while Maddox parked a heavy palm on the boy's shoulder like a lock, the judge said. "Back it up." He smirked and didn't move. The gallery chuckled when he looked me over and said, "You mop. I enforce the law, and I could have swallowed it like I've swallowed 1,000 insults, but my mouth got there first and said, 'Your Honor.'" I saw him shove the boy in the hallway, and the whole room snapped toward me like a flock turning all at once. He didn't like that power never does, so he went for the quick kill, ripped his body cam off his vest, fed it to a portable screen, and suddenly we were all watching a hallway where it looked like Jalen threw the first spark. Neat angles, clean audio, no hand on the shoulder, no hissed insult, no shove. The kind of video that makes decent people doubt what they felt in their gut. 30 seconds earlier, he tapped the screen like a game show host. Their evidence, and I stepped close enough to smell his aftershave and said, "Freeze it at 13:42:45. The tech did advance 1 second. It jumped to 13:42:47, and a low wave moved through the room because even folks who didn't like me hearing my own voice in public understood numbers. Body cams don't skip like that unless somebody told them to. A clerk in the back even muttered something about how buffered cams hardly ever drop frames. The judge's eyes went thin. "Sergeant, that device is impounded pending review," and you could see pride chewing through his last piece of gum. He had another trick ready. They always do. Switched to a storage room clip where I sat under a buzzing light flipping old papers, while a voice that sounded like me said, "I'll forge it, make him fall." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the lip sync was bad, and the man thought TV magic still worked in a room full of people who were actually there. My mouth doesn't match the audio. "Your Honor, run the waveform." Somebody laid a dirty track and he smiled like a man tossing bait in a lake he owns, says the woman with a notebook full of gossip, which is when I took the gray ledger from inside my jacket, the one Jalen slipped me with hands that couldn't stop shaking, and raised it for the front row. Not gossip, arithmetic columns of names, dates, amounts, initials that meant more than initials should, and we were officially past the point where a gavel can bring peace. A man with a limp and a jacket 2 sizes off stood in the back and said he saw the hallway shove with his own eyes, and the tide shifted again. Not a clean turn, just enough to keep me from drowning. And here's the part cameras didn't get that first day because I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Once upon a time I wasn't cleaning floors. I was carrying a small team through nights with no names, radio off stars like pinholes in a black tarp, and I learned the quiet things that keep people alive. Then I chose a mop and a badge with someone else's name on it because anonymity is safer than applause. But secrets have a way of finding a microphone, especially when someone who owes you his life walks through the back door. "Judge Lucas Rios," he said, voice like gravel in memory. "Former Joint Special Missions, that woman led me through fire when I couldn't see my hands. She's not lying and she isn't scared of you." Every lens pivoted. A reporter named Nina Park lifted her phone and went live, and my stomach dropped because when your past gets read out loud in a room with strangers, it's like being measured in public. You stand where they tell you and hope the number makes sense. The judge called recess. Federal agents collected the cam and the ledger. Bailiffs collected me gently, like I was glass said. I'd be escorted for my own safety, which any adult recognizes as a polite way to say, "We'd like to control where your mouth goes." They parked me in a dreary holding room with a humming vent, and a young officer with a squeaky new badge slid a note under my plate that said, "Don't talk without counsel. They're going to call it witness protection." It isn't. She kept her eyes down and whispered, "I believe you and I memorized her name tag, T. Boone, because you keep small, brave names close." By nightfall, the city split clean across like a melon. Half convinced I was a schemer who practiced takedowns between shifts, half convinced I'd said out loud what they already knew by the ache in their gut. Nina's stream climbed into the millions, which is how a hearing got scheduled, like a storm builds, phone calls, chatter, pressure in the air. And the next morning I was sitting 20 feet from Congressman Colin Hartwell, a Sunday show regular with a fatherly voice, and Graham Whitaker, billionaire smile CEO of a holding company that owns companies that own other companies, including a consultant outfit that teaches police departments how to message under stress. Cute way to say spin the chair. Asked if I orchestrated a smear with forged materials, and I said, open the ledger. Call the names if I'm lying, I'll mop your floors tomorrow. Hartwell asked to suspend the documents until they could be verified. A long word that buys short time. And Maddox popped up with one more card. A grainy clip from some defense archive where a woman who looked like me hit a young soldier and he collapsed. People love to believe the worst about women who don't bow. Nina didn't blink. She pushed a new live this time. The file name said, Iron Trace Raw. And there I was in the desert pressing gauze on a kid's wound, telling him to hold on later. He signed a statement in a hospital bed saying I saved his life. You could feel the room's temperature change, not heat and not cold. Something like air finally moving where it had been stuck. That was when a building alarm started bleeding from the parking level and security hustled. A staffer stumbled in with a folder stamped Red Contingency Memo B, approved money lines, talking points. A line that said, containment. If narrative destabilizes public trust, signed by Whitaker. We weren't just tugging a thread, we were holding a rope that ran up into a ceiling none of us had really looked at. And outside people came into the streets with cardboard signs and hard truths. Veterans showed up with empty hands and full hearts. The chant wasn't my name, which I appreciated. It was one word: justice. And if you've never heard that word shouted by strangers who don't agree on much else, it changes where your ribs sit. The trial came quick for government time. Judge Miriam Abbott in the middle, Maddox, Hartwell, Whitaker in a row, staring at a future they couldn't market their way out of. The prosecutor didn't sing. She stacked body cam metadata first. Buffer logs, splice points, export times. The 2-second jump at 13:42:45 is not a glitch, it's a cut. Then the ledger, where ink and paper got tested like fossils, signatures matched dates, didn't lie. Then an audio file from a key fob I carry because trust is a lock. I change often. Voices you'd recognize if you donate come election year. Discussed redirecting reports and burying an incident memo under budget review. The gallery didn't gasp. It exhaled like the room agreed on the shape of the truth. For the first time, Lucas told the jury about a night with no map and how counting names matters at sunrise. And I kept my eyes on the rail where Jalen sat in a borrowed tie. He kept tugging like it was choking him when it was his turn. He didn't shake. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. He said, my mom says memory saves you. He told them about the hallway, the word he won't repeat, the hand, the kick. And sometimes that's what justice needs most. A boy who looks the room in the eye and refuses to aim his voice at his shoes. Hartwell tried the old line. This is a smear coordinated by extremists. Whitaker dabbed his forehead like a churchman blaming the heat for a sermon that's really conviction. Maddox glared like his eyebrows could do what his boot couldn't. Their lawyer called me a vigilante, and I called him late for a truth he should have delivered a year ago. The jury left, came back, and we reached the part people think is the ending because headlines come with punctuation. Judge Abbott read like a metronome. Sergeant Trevor Maddox, guilty of aggravated assault, evidence manipulation, intimidation under color of law, 40 years. He dropped forward, and for a split second I saw a kid who learned the wrong lesson and never found a better teacher. Representative Colin Hartwell, guilty of conspiracy and obstruction, 30 years, no early release. He stared past me at a spot on the back wall like he was waiting for a door to open where there wasn't one. Mr. Graham Whitaker, guilty of bribery funding, unlawful operations, and criminal enterprise, life assets seized, and his jaw twitched like money. Realizing for the first time it can't buy breath. The room stood, people cheered, reporters sprinted. Somebody tried to start a chant with my name. I shook my head and took the side exit because I wasn't trying to become a statue. People leave flowers at. I was trying to walk through Tuesday without flinching at a hallway. Outside, under a tired elm that needs the city to spend money, it never does, Lucas said. You did it, and I told him. We did the first part because anyone who's fought anything bigger than a man knows verdicts are mile markers, not finish lines. Nina jogged over. breathless, telling me the press wanted a quote at the mic. I said, "Let the evidence talk. I'm done auditioning for belief," and we made it almost to the crosswalk when a black SUV rolled by, too slow, and a window cracked 2 inches, a glint of a cufflink, and that heavy old feeling slid up my spine like a cold hand. Lucas stepped in front of me without asking. The car kept rolling, the city noise came back, and I remembered how survival is a habit you keep even when the crowd is on your side. People wrote me letters, after some of them soft, some of them sharp. A few said I ruined their faith in institutions, and I wrote back that I didn't ruin anything. I pointed at the rot and said, "Look, Faith, that can't handle sunlight is a choir robe on a scarecrow, a costume in a field, not protection for a harvest." And some folks asked if I'd do it again, knowing what it cost. Sleep like a broken record friends who stopped inviting me because truth makes a holiday table awkward the way I scan every lot before I step off the curb. And I don't answer quick because easy is for people who didn't have to live it. But then I think of Jalen untying that too tight tie in the hallway, and Officer Boone sliding a note under a plate like she was passing oxygen, and a crowd shouting one word with empty hands, and I say, yes, I'd do it again, I'd do it tired, I'd do it scared, I'd do it knowing applause becomes silence the second you need it least. I went back to work because floors don't shine themselves. People spill coffee like it's a sport. The kid at the magnetometer still asks folks to empty their pockets like he's asking them to set down stones. Judges bang, lawyers argue, and the world keeps doing what it does. Some days I catch my reflection in a dark window and don't recognize the woman looking back, so I adjust the brim of my cap and keep moving because forward is the only direction that has ever saved me. You want the twist, right? The one that sits in the middle of your chest and makes you rethink every hallway and handshake. Here it is. The ledger wasn't the first proof and the verdict wasn't the last word. There are names that never made it to a chyron, and there are officers who show up, do the work, go home, and would never let what happened to Jalen happen on their watch. The world is not one note, it's a chord, and if we forget that, we turn justice into a team sport with jerseys, when it ought to be a daily chore like dishes do it or it piles up and starts to smell, you know what I mean? So here's where I leave it in your hands because that's where it was headed anyway. Not a monument, not a meme, a question. What side of the truth are you standing on when the room gets loud? When a clip looks clean and your gut says otherwise? When a kid bites his lip to stop the shake in his jaw and decides to speak? When a janitor says, "I saw it," and a sergeant says, "Sit down"? Do you watch or do you step forward? Do you believe the cut or do you ask why 2 seconds disappeared? Do you keep the peace that lets harm go quiet? Or do you keep the peace that keeps dignity whole? Because those are not the same thing and never have been. If you stayed this long, talk to me. Tell me where you're watching from and what justice looks like from that zip code or that country. Tell me when you saw power used like a boot and when you saw it used like a shield. Tell me if you think I should have kept mopping and kept my mouth shut, or if you believe one person without a title still gets to stand up and say no. Drop a comment. Argue with me if you need to share your story. If you can hit follow, if truth matters to you, because stories don't change the world alone. People who refuse to look away do, and I'm asking you to be one of them.